Hi, I'm Gareth Green, and in this video I'm going to address a question that has been asked of us several times, and it's the trick to smooth key changes. Various people saying, I'm writing bits of music or I'm improvising or whatever, and I get stuck in the same key all the time, or if I try to change key, it's a bit of a jolt and it doesn't sound too clever. So kind of how do we do this so that those key changes are nice and smooth and we don't suddenly go, whoop, something funny happened there. Okay, well, I've written a short piece of music that includes two key changes. So I start in the tonic key of F major, modulate, change key to C major, come back to F, go to B flat major, come back to F. So there's quite a few key changes in 8 bars or 8 measures. So here's the piece, so you can just sort of hear what's going on here. Now I'm hoping that just listening to that, you can hear, oh yeah, there's definitely key changes going on, but you're not having any moment where you suddenly think, whoa, what happened there? Because there's a little trick to doing this, and it's called pivot chords. Okay, let's have a little think about what's going on then. So first of all, I'll just sort of sort out exactly where these keys move, and then you can kind of get the idea of what we're talking about here. So we're starting in F major, and that goes on all the way through to this point. Then you'll notice in the next bar, the next measure, we've got B naturals. So if we've got rid of the B flat in the key signature, now we've got B natural. We haven't got any flats at all. So we're probably in the key of C major. So from this point, we're in the key of C major. Okay. Now, there's one thing that happens at the end of this last bar here. There's a B flat. And that B flat, of course, is then pushing us back to F major. So by the time we get to that very last half beat there, we're on our way back to F major, but not for long. Because then you might notice we introduce an E flat. So if we've got B flat in the key signature, now we've added an E flat, we've gone to B flat major. So there's B flat major from that point. And that carries on until there. And then we come back to F major to finish the piece. So that's where the modulations or the key changes occur. Is it sensible to go from F major to C major? Well, yes, it is, because if you think about it, F major's got one flat, C major's got no flats. So they're neighbouring keys. And if you know your circle of fifths, then you'll realise that, oh yeah, actually C major's at the top of the circle, no sharps, no flats. F major's just one key to the left, so it's got one flat. So they're neighbouring keys. So that's one of the things you want to think about if you want a smooth key change. If you go from a key that's got no sharps and no flats, and suddenly you plunge into a key that's got 7 sharps, you're probably going to know that you've done it. But if you're using neighbouring keys, closely related keys, well, that's fine. We then go from C major to F major, so we're going back to F major. So again, it's a neighbouring key. We then go to B flat major. Well, if C is at the top of the circle of fifths with no flats, F major's one key round, that's got one flat. The next key round is B flat major, and that's got 2 flats. So to go from F major to B flat major means adding a flat, as opposed to F major to C major, which meant getting rid of a flat. So these are neighbouring keys. And then to come back from B flat major to F major, well, fine, we've just got to get rid of a flat again. We've got to get rid of that E natural, that E flat, and come back to E natural. And you can see I've sort of confirmed that here with this E natural, having had these E flats that were indicating B flat major. So first of all, there's the logic of which key am I trying to modulate to, because if I'm taking a plunge into a key that's miles away, that's probably going to be less smooth. So always be thinking, well, which are my 5 closely related keys? So if I'm starting in one key, what's one key on the sharp side? What's one key on the flat side? what are the relative keys? So if I'm in C major, the relative minor is A minor. G major with 1 sharp, well, the relative minor is E minor. Going the other way, F major with 1 flat, the relative minor is D minor. So those are your closely related keys. So if you want them to be smooth, well, probably best to use closely related keys. And the other thing is, when we move from one key to another, if you want the key change to be smooth, always use what we call a pivot chord. Okay, let's have a look and see if we can discover where the pivot chords are. Well, have a look at this chord. Now, why am I talking about this chord? It's a chord 1 in first inversion in F major. So let's have a little look at that. So if I'm in F major, chord 1 is an F, A, C chord. Now that might be chord 1 in F major, but it's also chord 4 in C major. And so that makes this a pivot chord. So what's a pivot chord? It's a chord that belongs to the key you're leaving and a chord that belongs to the key that you're joining. So I like to think of this as a kind of musical door. You know, I'm in this room at the moment. When I want to leave this room, I need to walk through the door to the next room. It's very difficult to do it any other way. I'm not up to climbing out of the window anymore, I'm afraid, but trying to go through the wall, totally impossible. I need to go through the door. So a pivot chord is a musical door. It's saying, well, this room is F major, the room next door is C major, and the pivot chord is the door that takes us from F major to C major. It's a common space, and that door, that pivot chord, belongs to the key you're leaving and belongs to the key you're joining. So as you can see from what I've said about this pivot chord here, it's a chord 1 in F major, but it's also a chord 4 in C major. So everything to the left of that chord is in F major, and everything to the right of that chord is in C major. That's how you work a pivot chord really effectively. Okay, where is the next pivot chord? Well, we need to look at this one next, because what's this chord? It's a chord 5 in first inversion in F major. Let's have a look at what that means. So here in F major is chord 5. Okay, it's got E in the bass, it's in first inversion, doesn't matter. So that's chord 5 in F major, but it's also chord 1 in C major, isn't it? So I've been in C major, I come to this pivot chord and I say, yep, that's chord 1 in C major in first inversion, but it's also chord 5 in F major in first inversion. And then what I do to confirm the key, once you've gone through the pivot chord, you use the accidental that confirms where you're going. Well, this B flat does it, doesn't it? Because we've got rid of these B naturals that we've had. And by the way, this should be a B natural in the bass as well. Apologies for missing that, but I'm sure you've all spotted it. Excellent. So that's what we're doing there. So we've had these B naturals telling us about the key of C major, but now we want to go back to F major. Having gone through the pivot chord, we introduce the accidental that takes us to the next key, in this case F major. So everything to the left of the pivot is in C major, everything to the right of the pivot is in F major. Okay, now I wonder if you worked out where the next pivot chord comes, because the next pivot chord is here. Now, just to be clear about this, it couldn't be any later than that, because you notice in the next chord, we've got E flat, so that belongs to the new key. So the pivot chord must be to the left-hand side of new accidentals. Okay, so we're in the key of F, but now notice that we've got this chord of F major again, haven't we? Chord 1, so let's just make a note of that. So that's chord 1 in F major, but in the key of B flat major, that is also chord 5. So it's another pivot chord. So everything to the left of that is in F major. Everything to the right of this is in B flat major. So I'm looking at that pivot chord and I'm saying it's chord 1 in F major, but it's also chord 5 in B flat major. So that's my musical door that I go through. And then immediately I tried to introduce the accidental for the new key, that's that E flat, which then comes up, you know, every time I need to use the note E, until I come to the next pivot chord. Have you worked out where the next pivot chord is? Well, it's here. Because when I come to that chord, it's a B flat major chord, isn't it? So B flat, D, F. That's chord 1 in B flat major, but it's also chord 4 in F major. So you see how that's 4 in one key, but it's 1 in the other key. So I come along to this point in B flat major. Everything to the left of the pivot chord is in B flat major. There's the tonic chord of B flat major. And then I say this is also chord 4 in F major. So I come out of that and everything to the right of that is in F major. So I don't have any E flats anymore, but I have an E natural. So if you're wanting smooth key changes, the first thing is use closely related keys so you don't have any bumps in the keys. The second thing is use a pivot chord. The third thing is, having used a pivot chord, everything to the left of the pivot chord is in the previous key. Everything to the right of the pivot chord is in the new key. If you get that sorted, you're in business. So we start in this with F major, pivot chord into C major, so it's kind of quite smooth, isn't it? Pivot chord, add the B flat to take us to F major. Pivot chord into B flat major. Pivot chord into F major. So in the space of 8 bars or 8 measures, you can go from F to C to F to B flat to F, manage all those modulations perfectly smoothly. Well, if you've enjoyed this video, let me invite you to have a look at the Music Matters website, www.mmcourses.co.uk. So much stuff to look at there, but one of the things you want to look at is maybe courses. We've got lots of courses covering so many aspects of music, and lots of people have taken these courses and told us how useful they've been. Now, if you're looking at a video like this, you might be into songwriting. One course we've got there is called Creative Songwriting. And we look at song all through the ages, as well as modern song. And we think about how to compose a song in the best possible way. Excuse me. So if you have a look at that course, you'll have a chance to get a perspective on songwriting over the ages, what we've learned from songwriting from the past, how we might use some of that, how we now do things a bit differently. We'll be examining some quite famous songs. We'll be writing some of our own songs in different styles, and you can follow through the whole process from A to Z. How do I write a song? How do I write a melody? How do I get the words to fit so they really work well? How do I come up with chords? What do we do with all that once we've got it going? So a huge volume of stuff on how to go about writing songs. So whether you want to write pop songs, whether you want to write more conventional songs, doesn't matter actually. It's full of instruction. And if you just want to compose anything, there's heaps of stuff in that course that will help you to do that. So have a look at that course, have a look at everything else that's there while you're at it. www.mmcourses.co.uk.